Before we start, I just want to say some precautions about the experiment. Bromine is extremely toxic and its IDLH value is only 3 ppm. It is mandatory to perform this reaction in the fume hood or outside. Also, it is recommended to wear a respirator. In the last video, I made phthalimide from urea and phthalic anhydride. With the phthalimide, we are going to make N-BromoPhthalimide. Originally, I planned to make N-BromoSuccinimide for bromination of toluene. However, I didn't have supplies that are needed, so I came up with this very similar compound that can do the exact same thing. To make N-BromoPhthalimide, we need to put bromine to the imide group of the phthalimide. First, mix the phthalimide with sodium hydroxide solution. Second, put the elemental bromine or Br2 in the basic phthalimide solution. This sounds easy, but I don't have an elemental bromine and I should make it. I do have a bromine water, but the amount of bromine inside is not enough for our reaction, so I had to make it and distill it. I also thought about in situ synthesis, that the creation of bromine and NBP synthesis happens at the same beaker. But since bromine is prepared in acid condition and phthalimide is dissolved in the basic solution, this was not an option. To perform both bromine distillation and NBS synthesis clean and safe, I got up with this setup. On the flask left, we have our bromine generator. To the 3-way distillation adapter, we attached a dripping funnel. You can use a 2 or 3 neck round bottom flask for putting the dripping funnel. Then the distillation adapter is connected to a water condenser for condensation of bromine. On the right side, we attach a vacuum distillation adapter connected to a tube, which is for the ventilation of bromine. On the round bottom flask right, we have our reactants, which is phthalimide. On the bromine generator flask, we had 90 ml of water and 58.2 ml of 98% sulfuric acid. When the flask is warm to touch, we could add 47 grams of sodium bromide. On the dripping funnel, it is filled with 110 ml of hydrogen peroxide. On the right side, we have our reaction flask. Add 25 grams of phthalimide, add 8 grams of sodium hydroxide dissolved in 100 ml of water. With vigorous stirring, phthalimide is all dissolved in. I recommend using a larger flask than 250 ml because in my case it foamed up and refluxed. Everything was cooled with an ice bath. It is also important to stir everything very vigorously. This is the reaction formula that we want to carry out. First, we make hydrogen bromide by reacting sodium bromide and sulfuric acid. Then we use hydrogen peroxide for oxidizing hydrogen bromide, making bromine. If you add sodium bromide when it's too hot, it could generate bromine because sulfuric acid is also an oxidizer. So add it when it is warm to touch. It is best to drip hydrogen peroxide when all the sodium bromide dissolves, but mine didn't dissolve that well, so I just preceded it. Before we start, I recommend preparing a spray bottle with solution of sodium thiosulfate and sodium bicarbonate. This is used to reduce bromine that might have escaped the apparatus, and this actually does a great job. Also, you should wear a respirator, goggles, and lab coats. As you drip down the hydrogen peroxide, the flask changes into orange color to reddish brown color. almost like blood. This reaction was pretty exothermic and I didn't have to heat the flask to distill the bromine. Bromine has a boiling point of 58.8 degrees Celsius. It fumes a lot and it fills up all the apparatus. That's the bromine condensed and dripping down. On the MVP flask, this is the reaction that happens. Phthalimide first reacts with sodium hydroxide to make sodium phthalimide. And distilled bromine reacts with it and creates our desired product, N-BromoPhthalimide.
Oh, I have to stop.
I don't know the exact reason why, but MVP flasks foamed up and started to reflux to the ventilation tube. I stopped the addition of hydrogen peroxide and changed it into a large 500ml flask. This is the reason why you should have a lap jack, because you don't have to tweak all your lap stand setting or so. It took quite a lot of time to raise all the apparatus setting and change the flask. And bromine flasks are cooled down, so I had to apply the heat to continue distilling bromine. The end of the bromine distillation is shown that the flask clears up. MVP flask was stirred for additional 15 minutes. All the content in MVP flask is vacuum filtered. I don't recommend using threaded grab filter because particles are pretty fine and it has some possibilities of clogging your filter. You should wash all the bromine with water and final filter should be colorless, but mine didn't. Also, lots of bromine escaped from the funnel flask and I had to use my spray bottle to knock them down. Here, you can see how effective reducing agent spray bottle is. I got pretty curious, and bromine actually smelled almost identical as those bleach, which is chlorine, actually chloramines. N-BromoPhthalimide was left on a vacuum for a few minutes and put in the desiccator for drying. I left it about for 4 days and its texture was still pasty, and I don't think I could draw more water because its powder is extremely fine, plus there are some elemental bromines mixed with the powder. Also, it was extremely hard to scrape up all the powder from the filter paper and dish. And I had to measure the weight of the entire MVP filtered Petri dish, and then it is subtracted by the weight of the Petri dish and the filter paper. The final yield was 23.23 grams of N-BromoPhthalimide, which correspond to 0.1 mole, representing 60.5% yield. The theoretical yield based on phthalimide is 38.23 grams, or 0.17 mole. This is not the exact yield, and because I think there must be some leftover bromine inside, and subtracting thingy can't get me the exact value. This will be later used for bromination of toluene. Also, it is important to wash your glass apparatus with reducing agent before washing it with the tap water. So that's it, and thank you for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe. Also check my other videos as well.